Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of True Scary Stories. First up we have, there we go, That Time I Won a Creep Out Contest with a Possible Creep. By Depleted User. I, 22 female at the time, used to live in one of those crappy apartments that are on top of convenience stores in the old downtown that goes to shit after a town gets its own Walmart. Even though it was a busy part of town, I still recognized my neighbors and the regulars from the bars next door and across the street. There was like a 4-month span where I was unemployed. Every morning during that time, I would go to the store, get my coffee, a pack of cigarettes, and whatever stuff my husband, then boyfriend, and I needed for the house. After a while, I started noticing a silver Honda minivan parked directly across the street from my apartment building. I probably only noticed it because it was the only vehicle that parked in the same spot every day. The driver wasn't anyone I recognized from the surrounding businesses, worker or patron, so I guess it just made me wonder. Who is that guy, and why does he park there every day? One day I decided to watch him from my apartment to see which building he went into. To my surprise, the guy never got out of his van. He parked in the spot, sat there for a few hours, and then drove away. It made me think back. I don't remember a time seeing that van without him in it. After watching him for a few more days and confirming that the guy never left his vehicle, sounds like somebody lost his job and he's trying to make sure he's out the house for a few hours every day, I started to brainstorm reasonable explanations for his strange daily routine and was getting increasingly paranoid at the same time. Maybe he's on a break, maybe he's a PI, maybe he's a process server, maybe he's a creep, maybe he's watching me. It was creepy enough to make note of seeing his van there every day, but it wasn't creepy enough to call the police or confront the dude. Until one day, my husband came home early from work. As soon as my husband's car turned into the parking lot, van guy pulled away. That was different. Normally he would stay until around 2 p.m., but it was noon when my husband came home. Coincidence? Probably. Did it creep me out? Definitely. That's when I decided to start making it known to him that I knew he was there every day. At first I would just stop and stare at him for a moment before going to the store, trying to make eye contact with him. I did this for a few days. At one point I walked out onto the street with a notepad and pen, and jotted down his license plate. That was just a smart thing to do, really. I kind of made it obvious what I was doing. Eventually, I pulled up a lawn chair and started going outside to smoke. I would sit there and stare at him while I had my cigarette, and then go back inside. He definitely noticed me. We would make eye contact, and he would look away. I don't know how many times I thought about walking up and asking him why he parked there all the time and never got out. After about 3 or 4 days of me trying to have a staring contest with this guy, he stopped parking his van across the street, aka U1. I don't know why he was there, but sometimes I think back to that time. I wonder if he saw me as a crazy lady who used to stare at him while he was working, or whatever it was. I mean, hopefully it was something harmless, but it is all same space, every day, never leaving the vehicle. Could be he was spying on someone, not necessarily you, but maybe someone else in the street. And not necessarily for nefarious reasons. It could have been somebody was up to something, maybe an insurance thing. Who knows? Who knows? Story number 2. Looking like Harley Quinn got me chased. By New Marsupial 9143. This was a few years ago. I, 34 years old, female, was out with friends from work. We were saying goodbye to one who was moving away for a new job. It was initially just dinner, but ended up clubbing. To be honest, I'm normally not the most sensible person when out for the night, but as the clubbing wasn't planned, I had driven, so I wasn't drinking. I was a bit annoyed about being out clubbing as the only one not drinking, but in hindsight this saved my ass. For clarification, I have always had an eccentric appearance and often color my hair. At the time, my hair was blonde with blue and pink tips, often worn in pigtails. I had a pair of knee-high boots. I loved that were one black and the other white. Yes, I bought 2 pairs of boots specifically to wear them this way. I loved when little kids in shops would call me Harley Quinn, and often dressed towards that. I think it's called stealth cosplay. This night, I was in my boots and pigtails, fishnets and shorts, and even an HQ printed tee. I got into dancing and spent a fair bit of time looking after my smashed friends. The drag queens at my local gay bar loved my outfit, and despite being sober, I was getting hyped and enjoyed myself. I eventually made sure my drunk friends got into rides safely and started walking back to my car, which unfortunately I hadn't put in a parking structure. I was cheap and left it in a side street. I'll never do that again. The streets were brightly lit and fairly populated, but I kept my keys in my fingers just out of general practice. I had received a wolf whistle or two, and someone calling, "Hey, Holly!" I had to do it once, but I was kind of used to catching attention from the way I dressed. I just ignored it, wanting to get to my car. "Holly!" All right, twice. I heard it again, but it was someone else's voice. I didn't look, because I didn't want to engage to make an opening for conversation. "Don't ignore us, bitch!" That's when I looked across the street and saw that it was 3 men. I just shook my head to show I'm not interested and kept walking. There were other people in the lit street, so I figured they wouldn't do anything. I was wrong. They crossed the street. "I'm just heading home, guys. Sorry." I started speeding up. They followed me. "We just want to talk a second." "You don't gotta go home yet." "We'll take you home, Harley. Come on." Well, I don't know about the audience, but I'm wet. My heart was racing at this point. I looked to the small handful of other people in the street. Some were stumbling, shit-faced, most either ignored or didn't even notice the situation. As people shouting at that hour in that part of the city was common. I didn't care if it looked like I was overreacting. I clutched my keys and ran. I mean, it's better to overreact and be safe and to underreact and be dead. Yes. I'd hoped they'd realize they were coming across as creeps and just back off. Oh, honey, they knew that from the get-go. Or maybe they'd just call me a crazy bitch and let it go. They called me a bitch, all right, but my blood ran cold as I heard them chasing me. I'm not a fast runner, and though my boots had wide heels, the heels were very tall, and I kept picturing myself tripping, picturing myself dropping my keys, picturing them catching up. I kept focus, not daring to look back, knowing how I'm clumsy and that I couldn't risk it. I rounded the corner. The street was empty, but my car was under a streetlight. I was holding back tears as I reached the door. I took a breath to steady my fingers, adamant not to be that person so close to safety just to screw it up by panicking and dropping my keys. I opened it, got inside, slammed the door and locked it just in time. One of them tried to open my door. I was trembling and couldn't make out what they were saying as they shouted, kicking my car, cursing at me, calling me Harley. I peeled out of there, almost hitting one of them. Well, next time. After 5 minutes driving, enough to get a safe distance, I pulled aside, shaking and crying too hard to drive safely. I got a haircut the next day. Ow. My HQ phase was over. It took a while to be comfortable dressing in my own style again. This isn't the only time I've been harassed by men, but this was the only time it was a group, and I'd never been chased or had someone show explicitly violent intent like they did that night. If I'd had anything to drink or let panic cause me to fumble, I don't want to think about what they might have done to me, but sometimes I just can't avoid thinking about it. And story number 3, third and final story for this video. I was almost kidnapped at a station by C. Narwhal, 1719. When I was 17 years old, I met a family friend from my old school that she left before we graduated because she went to live in the capital with her family. She was also 3 years older than me. We were happy to see each other again, and she invited me to spend a couple of days at her parents' in the capital. They were out of the city all summer. Of course I agreed. Summer came and I managed to save enough money for a train ticket. The rest will be on my friend, she said. My mom was against this trip because she couldn't give me money to book a hotel in case something goes wrong. Also, she didn't really know my friend well to trust her. We were in a really bad place, financially. Literally just enough to buy some food and that's it. But me, being a stupid teenager that wasn't used to no, finally persuaded her. Capital was a night away from my town, so I arrived in the capital in the morning. My friend worked her last shift before holiday and wasn't able to meet me for the whole day. That's why we decided that I'd go for a walk, visit museums, and will only go to her apartment in the evening, when she comes home from work. Her apartment was on the outskirts, nothing interesting to see there. I sent her a message that I'm finally in the capital, and she replied with, "Okay, can't wait to get off work." I went walking for hours till my legs hurt, but I was overwhelmed with excitement. Evening came, and I was standing outside of her place. She wasn't answering my calls. I knocked and knocked, to no avail. Finally, she picked up the phone just to say she's sorry, but there's been a family emergency and she's going back to her and mine hometown now. In fact, she was already there because she traveled on a plane. There's a word for your friend, but I'm not allowed to say it on this website. My friend got the bad news in the middle of the day, went home and collected her things in a kind of fog, forgetting about me completely. Couldn't really blame her, but, I can blame her. I'd say she had a duty of care since you were there purely because she invited you. And she was going back anyway. I had some extended family in the capital, and I called them, but none answered. Later I learned they were all on a holiday in Spain. So now I was homeless, alone in one of the biggest cities in the world with nowhere to go. I didn't even have enough money for one night in a hotel, just a ticket back home in 4 days. That's what my mom was so afraid of. Where am I going to spend these 4 days and nights? I went back to the station and tried to change my ticket for a closer date, but there were no places on any train. Summer, high season, would be foolish to expect anything else. Then I tried to buy a ticket on the bus that was departing in half an hour. The destination was not my hometown, but a city 100 kilometers from it. Close enough. But to purchase the bus ticket, I needed to return my train one and get the money back. The queue was long, and while I was contemplating, the bus left, and the night arrived. I went back to the station and sat in a chair, thinking it will be safer than outside. The station was big, well lit, and had police after all. There were few unfortunate people like myself, mostly sleeping, hands wrapped around their bags. I never traveled alone, never been alone, and homeless at night. I was still quite a hothouse flower. This situation was a huge shock for me. I was terrified, scared, panicking, and I think about midnight I started crying. Just silent tears going down my cheeks that I'd wipe immediately. But it was enough for someone to notice me. In fact, I think I was noticed even before that. A guy came up to me and asked what's wrong. I was so desperate that I told him everything. He started grinning, I'll fucking bet he did, introducing himself as Ahmed. Said he will help me, but quickly got pushy and invasive. I got up and sat a couple of rows down, even more scared. Then I saw another guy looking at me. Our eyes met, and he approached, sat next to me, and said he watched my interaction with Ahmed, that I did a good thing getting rid of him, and how everything is going to be fine because he, Jan, will be with me till the morning and then get me to the main bus station in the other part of town, and will make sure I have a ticket home. He even promised to give me money in case I didn't have enough to pay for a ticket. Bus sounded like a good idea, being less comfortable than a train, therefore the odds of successfully buying a ticket were higher, because people rarely travel such long distances on a bus. Jan even said he's sure there will be a lot of empty seats. He also said I reminded him of his younger sister, and overall gave off the vibe of a good and trustworthy guy next door, that I immediately calmed down and believed everything is going to turn out well. I mean, Ted Bundy was also pretty charming before, the murdering part. We were talking for about an hour. Ahmed disappeared somewhere, and I no longer saw his eyes drilling holes in me and Jan. When Jan said that we both need to eat and rest a little before the morning comes, he suggested we go to the other hall. That hall was unlike the place we were sitting for the first part of the night, meant for sleeping. The other hall was dimly lit and quiet, with an enormously high ceiling that we could barely see due to the poor lighting. About 10 people were in chairs, sleeping. In the front of the hall was a small cafe and restroom at the end of it. Jan asked a waitress for hot water, then offered me noodles and tea. I suddenly remembered that every couple of hours there was an announcement that said you must never eat with someone you don't know to avoid your drink and food getting spiked. I immediately said Jan must eat half of my bowl and I will eat half of his. He was taken by surprise, but complied with my request. After we ate, I felt so much better. Jan and I sat in our chairs and started talking again, when all of a sudden our situation escalated. It was about 2 a.m., still too early for me to go outside and ask for help. Ahmed appears out of nowhere and attacked Jan, almost yelling, being very rude and telling him to leave me alone. Jan calmly asked him to go and talk somewhere else. I watched them move a couple of rows back and sit there. I expected Jan to get rid of Ahmed quickly, but their conversation lasted way longer than I thought. It took about 15 or 20 minutes, during which Jan looked at me, listening to what Ahmed was saying, nodded from time to time. His glance was cold and insolent, like I was no longer a human being to him. The kind and funny guy from next door disappeared. Finally, the guys got up and sat on both sides of me. I felt cornered, but then it got worse. 2 more guys appeared out of nowhere. Ahmed said they were his friends, smirking. I freaked out, and Jan patted my knee and squeezed it. I was happy I wore jeans, would hate him touching my skin. The guys were looking at me, laughing, talking gibberish, reminding me very much of hyenas. They were probably thinking there was no way out for me, and at the moment it was hard to disagree. The oldest one said something to me that I didn't understand, and I looked at him uncomprehendingly. They laughed again, and Ahmed said, "You didn't understand because it was prison lingo. He's been to prison, hasn't he? What were you done for? Tell her." "Doing something bad to a sweet girl like her," he replied with a smirk. All the men burst out laughing again. I tried my best not to look scared, but don't think they bought it. Who wouldn't be? There was a possibility they were trying to make me panic, but the prison guy was literally sitting on the floor next to my feet. He grabbed it and started trying to lift my jeans up. It got to me that in just a second this disgusting, stinky man will touch my skin, and it threw me in such a fit of rage that I pulled my leg back, nearly punching him, and screamed, "Don't touch me! Don't you dare!" I leaned over, and I swear I was ready to kill him with my bare hands. He looked me in the eyes, backed out, almost falling on the floor. I saw terror in his eyes, and for a moment it gave me such a pleasure. Of course I would never fight him, but this unexpected move from a teenage girl, scared nearly to death, really seemed to take them by surprise. The men were no longer laughing. They suddenly left me almost alone, with just Ahmed sitting near. I started realizing what just happened, and all my body was shaking violently. I couldn't stop it. Ahmed's glance was full of hate for me and something else I wasn't able to discern. "What do you think will happen in the morning? He pointed at Jan, takes you to that bus station? No, he'll take you to our place, and you can't imagine what we'll do to you." And he said what they'd do, for some reason I don't remember at all. Maybe my mind just obliterated it for the sake of my sanity. Anyway, I couldn't contain my panic anymore, and I got up and slowly went to the exit of the hall. I tried my best to keep the pace very slow, even though I wanted to run. I felt that if I'd run, it would provoke the men. They didn't stop me because I had nowhere to go. Outside, there's probably more of them waiting for me, and even if not, it's still too dangerous to try. I continued walking mindlessly, and like a dream in the desert I saw police sitting on a bench that the cleaner moved from the other hall while doing her job. I practically ran to the officers and told them my story. They didn't seem to care at all. One of them yawned and pointed at the empty space on the bench and said I can sit with them if I want to. Police in my country are quite corrupt. I've never heard of such a thing. So it was the best they could offer, and honestly I wasn't expecting more. I happily accepted the invitation and sat with them. In about 30 minutes, I saw Jan approaching us. He was alone. He greeted the police and looked like they knew each other. At this point, I wasn't surprised by anything. Really, what were all these guys doing at the station for the whole night? There's no trains from 1:30 till 4:30. No bags, they weren't sleeping or anything. They looked like a gang, not tired travellers stuck in the capital for the night. It was very possible they were doing all kinds of illegal business here, and the police knew and never intervened. Seriously, to even stay at the station at night, all passengers were required to have tickets for upcoming dates. I got mine checked twice when I entered the first and second hall, and these guys... how'd they even get in? That's why I didn't trust the police, but I was also hoping they wouldn't let the gang kidnap me in front of them. So Jan sat with us too. The officers even joked, "Is she your fiancée?" They all laughed, and I did too. After that, they returned to discussing their business while Jan tried to persuade me to get back to the dark hall. I asked what's wrong with him. I still thought he's a good guy, just playing to pretend he went along with their plans for me, as he couldn't possibly take down all of them. He got really agitated, practically begging me to go back. I eventually got tired and said no quite firmly. I couldn't think of any potential reason for me to go there. And why would his rescue plan even demand that? We sat in the chairs for a couple of hours. Every minute of it, I was afraid that these men would come for me, and it'd be over. I'm all my mom had left, but she'll never see me again. I'll become a statistic, another missing girl. I put all my strength in praying that I'll forever be a good daughter and a good person if God rescues me from these men. I never prayed so hard in my life, begging God to save me, not for me, but for my mom, because she wouldn't survive losing me. Prayers helped keep me calm and cleared my mind a little bit. Now I had an excellent plan of how to get out of the station and the capital as soon as the morning comes up. A part of my extended family lived 3 hours from the capital, and trains for their station departed every 2 hours. Tickets were cheap. I have never met them, but my granddad was on very good terms with them. I only needed to call Mom and ask her to tell Grandpa to call his family to pick me up. I was anxiously waiting for the morning to come, and every minute spent on the police bench was a minute won. Around maybe 4:30, I saw all the men who cornered me, including Ahmed. They stared at me with hungry eyes and greeted the police, shook hands with them, again no surprise. They passed us, probably wanted to meet the first morning train. It was from the capital city in the country Ahmed said he's from. Another hour went by, and Jan asked me to go back to that hall again. And this time I complied. Police were already moving the bench back anyway. Plus I saw Ahmed and his buddies leaving that hall, and most importantly, more and more people were arriving at the station in advance for the 6 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. trains. Men, women with children. I knew I almost made it. In the hall, Jan offered me to rest on his bag that he'd laid on his knees, but I refused and said I don't want to sleep. He replied with, "Well, I'm very tired and it's too early to go to the bus station. We can nap for an hour," crouching over his bag, and he seemed to fall asleep. I decided to wait, not knowing if he was genuinely asleep and wanting to avoid confrontation with him if possible. I could ask any woman for help, could go to the restroom and try to use their big open window to escape. Still, it would be much better if I could sneak out while he's sleeping. I waited for a whole hour, pushing it pretty close, but I wanted the hall to be as much as crowded as possible, in case he wakes up immediately after I make my move. So I got up at 6:30. He was still sleeping. I made a few steps, looking over my shoulder. He stayed in the same position. I really needed to visit the restroom that was at the end of the hall, so I did it as quickly as I could. When I was back in the hall again, he still seemed to be fast asleep. I exhaled with relief and ran away. Called Mom at 7 a.m., calmly explaining that my friend needed to leave and I can't stay at her apartment. So why wouldn't I visit my extended family in another town? She promised to get Grandpa to warn them of my arrival, and I bought the ticket immediately. Even if they'd kick me out, I'm not staying here another minute. It was an hour and 20 minutes till my train arrived, so I tried to blend in with the crowd, moving with them back and forth, hiding from everyone, including the police. Last night I got quite an understanding of how corrupt they were. One crowd took me to the hall where Ahmed and his buddies cornered me, and where I left Jan some time ago. But he was no longer there. His chair stood empty. Was he a good guy? Obviously not. Sometimes I still think about him, but can never get an answer. Guess I'll never know. Maybe it's even better that I didn't get to. Well, I think Jan definitely was not a good fella. Clearly friends with those guys. I mean, why would he be engaging in conversation with them? You did very well, you handled yourself very well, and it's good that you did at least figure you had an out. Your friend, in spite of the family emergency, what they did to you is quite frankly unforgivable. In my opinion, I don't think I'd be able to let that go. They could have made arrangements, even if you couldn't travel with them, so you could stay at their apartment temporarily until you were able to go in a few days. And if you were going back home anyway, you could have dropped the keys off. There was plenty of things they could have done to accommodate you, because you were only there and depending on them, and they were responsible for that. Okay, and that brings us to the end of today's video. Big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories. If you'd like to support the channel, you can sign up for my Patreon page, $1 or more a month, whatever you're comfortable with. Gives you early access to all the videos at once on Monday. There's also a link to my merchandise store over on Teespring, as well as my Discord server, my Threads account, and my email is kingofthecities@gmail.com if you need to contact me for any reason. That's everything for now, so until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves.